What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another live episode of the Officer Nate podcast. With me is a very special guest, and we are going to get right into it. But first, I need to give a quick shout out to State Patriot. Your clothing isn't nearly patriotic enough, let's face it. In these days, we need people wearing the flag proudly and showing their patriotism. Go visit statepatriot.com. You can also visit them on Facebook and Instagram at State Patriot. They have the really awesome dry fit shirts with the UPF 50 sun protectant. Those are the ones that I wear a lot. They also have really cool hats with removable patches. So you can wear the typical American flag patch. You can do a thin blue line patch, a Second Amendment patch. That's the one I like to wear the most. So go visit statepatriot.com or visit them at State Patriot on Instagram and Facebook. Now, without any further ado, let's bring in Christina Dages. Christina, how are you tonight?
Thank you so much for having me on, Nate. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some viewers and listeners that they're not familiar with your husband's story. So I'll give a quick overview, and then whatever I leave out, feel free to fill in the gaps. So last year in 2020, May of 2020, former officer at this point, Matthew Dages, was on duty with the La Mesa Police Department, which is near San Diego in California. And he dealt with a suspect who was acting suspiciously. He was in a place that he really wasn't supposed to be. He wasn't authorized to be there. Officer Dages approached him in a very cordial and professional manner. He was calm the entire time. The suspect got riled up. He got angry. He got agitated. Officer Dages ended up arresting him for battery on a police officer, and I think one or two other charges. You'll have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. But then this was in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And at that time, DAs and mayors and chiefs were all just spineless cowards who were just afraid to basically enforce the law and do their duties to their sworn offices and cowered to the woke mob in the wake of this. Now, the suspect that was arrested, his name is Amari Johnson. He's a black person. And so that's the only reason that Officer Dages is in this situation in the first place. He was charged wrongfully, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people, anybody with common sense, with falsifying a police report. Amari Johnson is, for all intents and purposes, he's a criminal. He was involved in a vehicle pursuit after this particular incident that we're going to be discussing. He led, I believe it was San Diego PD. He led them on a high-speed pursuit. He damaged public property. He fled on foot. And the DA, is it Summer Stephan or Stephen? Stephan. She dismissed all the charges because it turns out that Amari Johnson is her star witness in the case against Officer Dages. So what we're dealing with is just corruption at its pinnacle in the city of La Mesa. So, Christina, is there anything that I left out? I'm sure there probably is.
You did a great job. Thank you. Just to drill in a couple more details, because I think it's important is, my husband, the day of this incident, May 27th, 2020, it's 2 days after George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to highlight that because it comes into play a little bit later, right? He has this very routine law enforcement contact with the subject. And to even back it up just a tiny bit before that, my husband, Matthew Dages, is assigned to be at a trolley station on this day with other officers, and their job is to talk to everyone on the property and make sure that they have trolley fare. So in doing just that, my husband discovers that Amari Johnson does not have a trolley pass and he's on MTS property. So as you said, it's a lawful detention. That goes south because Amari Johnson was combative, didn't listen to basic demands. And when his friends pulled up in a car, he attempted to end the detention himself and walk towards his friends, which you can't do. And when my husband attempted to hold him in place with his hand, Amari Johnson struck my husband's hand off of him, which resulted in a low-level use of force. So all that to say, the George Floyd theme kind of comes back into play because Amari Johnson's friend pulled out his cell phone and taped just the use of force part of that interaction. And then they posted it online with the hashtag George Floyd, again, just 2 days after the George Floyd incident. So the video went viral. And it led to immediate protests at our personal house that same night and in the days that followed, as well as a larger protest at the police department, which ended up, buildings were burnt down and businesses were looted. And it was a really horrible culmination of events, all for a justified use of force. My husband just doing his job the way that he was trained. So it's we'll dive into it, but it really does boil down to, people in political positions of authority, essentially cowering to the mob, right? Because this happens 2 days after George Floyd, and the mob calls my husband racist. They call him a liar. They want him fired and criminally charged for assault. And essentially, you've got police department leaders, city leaders, and a wannabe woke district attorney here in San Diego named Summer Stephan, who essentially bow down to the mob just to give them what they want so that they hopefully don't burn down the city again. So in the midst of all that, you've got this upstanding police officer who is committed to serving the city where he was born and raised. He has no history of discipline at the department, and you take away his livelihood, you take away his reputation, and now you're threatening to take away his freedom. Yeah, and like you said, conveniently, one of Amari Johnson's buddies that filmed the incident, that recorded the incident, cut off the very beginning, which is pretty much the crucial part of this, right? You can see Amari Johnson, and it would have been nice to see it from that angle because it would have been a lot clearer. However, I got a clip of the initial contact that your husband makes with Amari Johnson. Let's just go ahead and watch it for a second. The first few seconds is silent because that's how the body cameras work. So right there, you see Officer Dages' hand go across the camera. That's the point where Amari Johnson hits him.
Bruh, get the fuck up off me, bro. Fuck is you grabbing me for, bro? I already told you niggas is coming straight. Bro, you look goofy as hell, bro. Stop touching me, bro. Obviously, nobody's going nowhere. Hey. Okay,
so that's just the initial contact. And again, like I said, we'll play it one more time just so in case people missed it. But let me preface this real quick. In case anybody is confused, when an officer detains you, you're not allowed to leave. You don't have the right to negotiate or argue or resist. The Supreme Court has ruled on this ad nauseum in cases over decades. You don't have the right to resist. And if an officer who is detaining you lawfully tells you sit right here and don't move, that's it. You don't move until he tells you that you're free to go, or he takes you to jail. Whatever the case is. But this is the mindset, the entitlement that so many people have for some reason developed especially the past couple of years, in the aftermath of George Floyd, is that, well, I have the right to resist police. That's how we fight tyranny and oppression. No, that is absolute bullshit. That is not how it works.
And the ironic thing is that resistance leads to use of force, which they then take issue with. And it's like, had you just complied and been reasonable, the interaction would have ended. No big deal. You could have moved on with your day. But you're right. This culture of resistance is like celebrated and normalized.
Yeah. Like you said, had Amari Johnson just said, oh, hey, yeah, I'm just, I'm waiting for my friends. Okay, stay right here. You don't have a trolley pass. We need to figure this out. Can I see your ID? Oh, sure. Here you go. Here's my ID. Sorry, this was the most convenient spot to wait for my buddies. Just be respectful, be cooperative. And like you said, things turn out completely different.
Yeah. Had he been reasonable, it would have been an educational moment. He wouldn't have even been cited. There would have been no use of force. None of this would have happened. But May 27, 2020, this incident escalated solely because Amari Johnson was not listening to orders, not being reasonable. He was combative. He was pre-assaultive. And he decided to strike a police officer in his attempt to end a detention. And then he resisted and delayed arrest. So all that led to the situation becoming what it was. It wasn't because of the police officer. It was because, again, you've got these people who think it's their entitlement and like their right to resist when they're legally detained. And it's important to note too, so you showed the body worn camera, which is great because you can see he smacks my husband's hand off of his shirt. And then a little bit later in the body worn camera, I think it's like the 6 minute, 50 second mark or so, He's in handcuffs. Matthew's about to do a search on him before he goes in the patrol car. And Amari Johnson admits on body-worn camera, he says, you know the reason I smacked you, right? Like he verbally admits on camera that he smacked this police officer.
And we can find that video too and play it for everybody. And we're going to show a couple more clips as well. I wanted to show this clip one more time just so that everybody can kind of focus on the initial it's the first couple seconds of this clip where you can see Officer Dages' hand just come across because it's being slapped away by Amari Johnson.
Get the fuck up off me, bro. Fuck is you grabbing me for, bro? I already told you niggas is coming straight. You look goofy as hell, bro. Stop touching me, bro. Obviously, nobody's going nowhere. Hey.
Yeah. So, again, just for those of you that don't quite get it, I know. See, here's the thing. I understand that it's not fun being told what to do. It's not fun being told that you're not free to leave. But that's the world we live in. Our police officers have the authority to dictate how these interactions go. They have the authority to detain you. They have the authority to arrest you. If there's reasonable articulable suspicion at the very least, and probable cause, they have the authority to do that. And again, like I said, the Supreme Court has ruled on so many cases that just reaffirm that. But like we've established already, there's this sense of entitlement that exists with certain groups of people who believe that they're exempt somehow from the laws of the nation, from the laws of the state and local laws, and it's getting them in trouble. However, now we're seeing DAs and mayors and chiefs trade in their duty and their oaths of office to subscribe to radical ideologies, and it's a problem, and we got to fix it.
It is. And I can say here in San Diego, the repercussions of what's happening specifically in the Matthew Dages case is, cops throughout the county have seen my husband be fired, villainized, demonized, criminally charged for doing his job. And so what that does is that wipes out proactive policing in San Diego County. And that leads to a huge surge in crime, right? That the crime is through the roof here in San Diego. And it's because it's like twofold. Officers are not being proactive because what's it worth putting your entire career and your family stability on the line for doing your job? And then the other side is criminals now see that there's no repercussions for their behavior, right? The DA is not going to charge them, so they can do whatever the hell they want and walk free, just like Amari Johnson's doing.
Yeah. And then like you said, then we end up with officers being charged for doing their job. And one thing you'll notice is, Casey Wooten, she says here, I feel like the officer remains so calm. He absolutely does. He remains calm throughout the entire contact. But you'll notice that Amari Johnson, he's agitated, he's moving around, he's fidgeting. It seems to me that he's probably under the influence of something, and it wouldn't surprise me considering that, he was found later on in another law enforcement contact with marijuana. Now, yeah, marijuana, whatever. But, he's definitely in somewhat of an irritable, agitated state, and he's the one not being calm, and he's the one escalating this situation.
Yeah, I mean, the use of force continuum. There's several options that a police officer has when they're dealing with a combative, non-compliant subject, and going hands-on with someone is one of the lowest levels, at least here in California.
Yeah.
And so, I agree. I think my husband Matthew showed a lot of composure, and really going hands-on was the very minimum force that he could have been justified in using, but that gets ignored, right? It's a justified low-level use of force that doesn't fit the media's narrative, so they don't touch that, and instead they stick with clickbaity phrases like racially charged arrest, and it's there is zero evidence that this was a racially charged arrest. In fact, when you listen to the full audio, the ironic thing is that all of the racial slurs, all of the verbal abuse, there's even homophobic and sexist slurs all come from Amari Johnson to Matthew Dages. But that conveniently gets swept under the rug by the media, by anyone who's talking about accountability. For some reason, it's the officer that's the villain and Amari Johnson is the victim. I mean, truly, that's how it's being portrayed here in San Diego.
Well, I get so many comments on my social media platforms, TikTok especially is a bad one. I did a video about an incident that took place in Wake Forest, North Carolina, where so the background behind this was there was a 15-year-old who attempted to strangle a 14-year-old girl at school, I'm assuming. Police show up to investigate. Mom of the 15-year-old boy shows up and attempts to drive him away from the scene of the crime. She almost hits an officer on her way out, runs a stop sign, and almost causes a collision. They pursue her for a short distance. They stop her. She pulls over, but then they order her out of the car, and she refuses to get out. Now, they gave her probably a good 30 seconds to comply and get out of the car, and they ended up breaking her window and pulling her out, putting her on the ground and handcuffing her. And everybody's going, oh, my God, the officers need de-escalation training. The suspects in these cases, that they dictate how much this is escalated or de-escalated. Again, resistance equals escalation. Cooperation equals de-escalation. Okay, it's not the cops. The cops show up composed, professional, just like Officer Dages did with this, and he remains calm and professional the entire time. He gets stern with him when he keeps trying to get up, and right before, when he gets handcuffed and he has to, sit him back down on the little wall there when the other officers showed up to back him up. But sometimes you have to do that. But again, like you pointed out, this is a very, very low level, very, very minor use of force. I mean, he could have been thrown to the ground face first and handcuffed, and that would have been justified, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're good.
Good point. And I feel like one of the things that's hard for the community to understand, well, I think the community is open to understanding it, but like there are a lot of groups in the community that are committed to not understanding this, is like an officer's job is command presence and controlling situations, especially when there is a combative person that's a threat to the officer's safety, that's a threat to community safety. And that's exactly what happened on May 27th between my husband and Amari Johnson. And it's like, not only was my husband trying to control this combative subject who was legally detained and not listening to any of, Matthew's commands, but there's a car of unknown people that pulled up that is kind of like on Matthew's backside, that they're screaming at Matthew, like Matthew doesn't know what's in the car, what's their intention. Mm-hmm. So it's like, an officer's job is to maintain control of a situation for officer safety and public safety. And that is not always going to look like the officer, saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, shaking hands. Like you are showing up and you are dealing with people on their worst day, people making bad decisions. And oftentimes it is a normal part of law enforcement to utilize use of force, right? You have to control the situation.
Yeah. Well, and what I think what people don't understand is there's a continuum when it comes to use of force. And at the very bottom of that continuum is police presence. And that's the point. I think that's where a lot of people are completely misinformed and misguided. Like I said earlier, when the police show up and you're detained or they need to question you, you're not free to go. If they have reasonable articulable suspicion to believe that you're involved in a crime, they can detain you and they can place you wherever they need to place you in order to feel safe, in order to control the scene. And that's a concept that a lot of people need to start learning, or else life is going to be very difficult for them when they have police dealings. Or I don't know, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll just continue to get more and more woke, and the people that resist, will be praised as heroes and activists now, like this dumbass.
And then
Johnson.
Simultaneously, right, crime is going to spike. These cities are going to go to shit. And so, like, if that's what these woke cities and these woke politicians want to do, like, do so at your own risk. Do so at your own demise, truly.
Yeah. I've talked ad nauseum about the massive the police exodus in a lot of these bigger urban areas like Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis. If they're not being fired and forced to leave because of a vaccine. A lot of officers are leaving just because, like you mentioned, there's no incentive to do the job anymore. How am I supposed to make these sacrifices and put my life on the line when, if I do my job the way I've been trained to do it, the way the Supreme Court says I'm allowed to do it per the Constitution, and then when I do everything correctly, a DA like Summer Stephan is going to prosecute me? Give me a break.
Preach it. That was so well said. And it's like, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, sorry. No, I just wanted to, whoops, that's the wrong one. I wanted to let everybody know that scrolling across the bottom of the screen, there is some contact information for the district attorney's office. And then you'll see contact information for the La Mesa Police Department. We're going to talk about a few of the key players here in just a minute, Summer Stephan being one of them. But the email address, there's 2 email addresses there for her office. what we would like folks to do is to email them to show your support for Officer Dages and give them respectfully, give them a piece of your mind about this, because we can't let this slide. We can't let it stand. The war on police is out of control. It never should have started in the first place, but now it's being taken to a whole new level by people who are supposed to be protective of officers.
Exactly, right. And it's in her mission, Summer Stephan, and the mission of her office is to, implement the law through like a fair and equitable lens and to ethically prosecute criminals. And like you brought up earlier in this show, just less than 3 months after Amari Johnson's incident with Officer Matthew Dages, he leads San Diego police on a felony vehicle pursuit through the city. He weaves in and out of traffic, puts citizens at risk. He crashes his car twice. He totals it. He bails on foot. He puts officers at danger. And Summer Stephan is declining to charge him for that felony. That is outrageous. And this is a DA who was elected on the promise of being pro-police, tough on crime. She was elected in 2018. A lot of local police unions donated to her campaign. And now she's refusing to criminally charge Amari Johnson while targeting Matthew Dages with a sham, ridiculous case. I mean, this is outrageous, and it's so important for people to get loud about what's happening in San Diego in the Matthew Dages case, because, especially with this DA, she's up for re-election in 2022. And she's done all of this to Officer Matthew Dages, and you better believe in 2022, she's going to approach these local police unions again and once again ask them to donate to her campaign. And so it's up to us, the citizens and the law enforcement community, to hold these elected officials accountable.
Yeah. And I mean, I've also preached this to people. If we don't turn things around in 2022, I mean, locally, statewide, and then nationally, I mean, I don't know what to say for anybody who's disgruntled, disillusioned, with the way the country's being run, with the way our states are being run. Stop voting for these people. It's maddening. Stop voting for the people who will bend the knee to a woke mob and sacrifice good people like your husband in order just to stop a few rioters and looters. How about you send your police force out? I guarantee you, if you stop with the prosecuting of these officers for doing their job and say, hey, go out and protect our city. If anybody is rioting and looting, take your bats, your hats, and your shields and go out and stop that shit. You won't get prosecuted for doing your job. Now, do it legally, right? Don't use excessive force. Yeah, always. And officers are always doing that. Yes, there are a handful of instances where officers are excessive in their force, but that's a fraction. That's a fraction of what we're actually talking about here with the amount of contacts that police have with people in the United States every day. We're talking millions. The excessive force and police brutality, that happens on a very, very minor scale. So if you tell your officers, listen, you arrested this guy, you arrested Amari Johnson. Now we have Black Lives Matter. They're planning a protest and they're going to burn down the city. We need you to go out and stop them. And as long as you do things correctly and legally, we won't prosecute you. Like, you're going to have to give officers that peace of mind now if you want them to stick around and protect your cities.
Yeah, the opposite is happening here in San Diego. And it's a shame because it's like citizens and residents that are the ones that suffer because there's gang activity, homicides, all through the roof, all because of the precedent set by our local DA that tells criminals, do what you want. I'm not going to prosecute you, but I will target a cop with an unfounded case. It's ridiculous.
It is. So speaking of Summer Stephan, the DA in La Mesa, what's the county there? What county are we in?
It's San Diego County, and then La Mesa is like a city within the county, and then the DA is the DA for San Diego County.
Okay, yeah. So San Diego County DA Summer Stephan, her star witness and victim, right? We'll throw air quotes up there for the victim part. So there's a little clip of him testifying. I want everybody to listen to this.
So, to me, there was no reason for me to be detained. It was also like subconscious. I really didn't realize that I was standing up.
Why would you ask Officer Dages if he was threatened by you putting your hands on him?
I was trying to get him to open up, speak to me. So if, the whole time he was being defensive and stuff like that, I thought maybe if I offered him, something to kind of like make him feel as though we could speak.
So that's just a load of bullshit, right? Because if we watch this next clip,
Nah, back up out of here, bro.
Listen to me.
Bro, y'all hella goofy, bro.
I'm talking to you, and you smacked me.
Bro, nobody smacked you, bro. Where I smack you?
You didn't?
Where I smack you?
You didn't?
Where I
You
smack
didn't hit my
Where I
arm?
smack you? All right, but why are you grabbing me, though? Why are you grabbing me?
Because you keep trying
Because
Why
you
you
keep trying
grabbing
to
me?
stand up.
Bro, shut the fuck up, quit talking to me, bro. I ain't got nothing to say to you, bro.
That's fine.
All right.
so yeah, he really sounds like the one who's trying to open up the lines of communication and be the civil diplomatic one, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a sad attempt on Amari Johnson's side of deflecting, right? We see the video, and if you let it play, I think even beyond that, he goes on a tirade of profanities against my husband. But yet in court, he says, well, that was me trying to establish a relationship with him. That's me trying to connect with him, get him to open up. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that that's being accepted, and it's ridiculous that this person is being hailed as some type of victim in the situation. This situation only became a thing because of this person's behavior and their resistive actions and the fact that they assaulted a police officer, admittedly.
Yeah. Well, I have another clip, and I should have said this before, but for those of you watching and listening, viewer discretion advised, because there is some profanity and some vulgarities here. But I wanted you. I spliced together a couple of clips because I want you to see just how ridiculous this guy is.
It's made changes in the last year, and it's a work in progress, although Johnson doesn't think it goes far enough.
There's a lot of words I could use to kind of explain my emotions towards the police department, but none of them would be good. And my mother taught me, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Suck my dick, nigga. Suck my fucking dick, nigga. You bitch ass boy. You a hoe, nigga. Bro, fuck him, bro. Yeah, walk away, pussy. Hey,
One by
no gun, all these niggas, I'll beat your ass.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
favorite is at the very end when he also, in addition to everything he said, he also threatens to beat Matthew's ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
I
heard
think
that
that's
right at the very end.
Yep.
So it's just, I don't know. For me, I honestly don't understand it. I don't understand. I mean, I ultimately I do. I think what these DAs and these mayors and these governors, senators, congresspeople, whoever, it's all about getting votes. And they know that if they can manipulate the entitled ones into believing that police officers are racist and they're corrupt, and that's a systemic problem, and that white people are standing in your way, and especially white cops, they're going to show up and they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. And it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're a person of color, then it doesn't matter if you've committed a crime or not. You're going to end up going to jail and you're going to go to prison, even if it's not warranted, even if it's not justified. That's the lie that they're selling. And some of these people are believing it. And but as you can see, it's working. It's working for these woke elected officials. That's, I mean, if there wasn't any election fraud, right, with the presidential election, that's the only reason Biden won this, was because he was successful in manipulating minority groups in this country to believe that the only salvation they have from racist police officers and, racist America altogether is to vote them into office, and they will take care of everything.
Yeah, it's all about political survivalhood, and it's about appealing to those middle of the road voters and selling them on this idea that there's this big bad wolf, and if you vote me into office, I'm going to protect you from the wolf. And it's like the wolf is this fictitious villain that you made up. And the sad part is like, in the midst of all this, you've got a hardworking officer and his wife who had just gotten married, this good middle class family who loves serving San Diego. We've both committed our careers to serving the community. We get caught in the crosshairs. Our lives get turned upside down. We have BLM protesting at our home, making death threats, forcing us for safety reasons to sell our home. And it's like, is this really my struggle with it is their own tactics kind of undermine the movement that they claim to be about, right? They're bringing they claim to be about eradicating violence, hate, character assassination based on the color of someone's skin. And yet they bring those very same things to my doorstep because my husband is a police officer who's white. And so I struggle with that a lot, that, they're undermining the very movement they claim to be furthering.
Right.
It's hypocritical.
Well, and it doesn't, I mean, honestly, if you think that you're helping a guy like Amari Johnson turn his life around, and again, I don't know how extensive his criminal history is. I tried to find it, but I think it's very well protected at this point. Like you said, the only thing you're telling a guy like this is that there's no consequences for him, that he's exempt from any laws, at least locally, And now, I mean, now what? Now, what if he's out committing other crimes, and he gets stopped by the cops? How does that contact go? I guarantee you, those police officers are going to be thinking about Officer Dages and what happened with him.
Absolutely. And I feel like Amari Johnson has now multiple times shown the community his true colors. He has shown police officers that he is not afraid to resist, assault, evade, to the detriment of public safety and officer safety. And yeah, it's like there's no repercussions for that type of behavior. And he sees that. And beyond just him as an individual, that emboldens criminal behavior throughout the entire county, which puts, hardworking citizens at risk. So it's completely backwards. And it's ironic and really sad because this district attorney, Summer Stephan, was elected into office on the promise of being the opposite of that, right? Being pro-police, being tough on crime, law and order DA. And instead, I mean, San Diego has the highest crime rates, I think, in record all-time high crime rates. So, we've got to get loud. We've got to make noise about the political railroading that's being allowed to happen to officers for just doing their job simply because the mob said so. We can't have a DA in office who will bow down to mob rule when they were elected into office to implement rule of law, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important. The emails are scrolling at the bottom of the screen to both the La Mesa Police Department leaders as well as the District Attorney of San Diego. They kind of made their own bed and now they need to lay in it. Last year, when the mob got loud and the mob burned down cities in the name of social justice, the DA in San Diego, as well as the La Mesa Police Department command staff, set the dangerous precedent that we bow to public pressure. We won't go by facts. We won't go by what's right or wrong. We're going to bow to the person or the group that's yelling the loudest. So now's our chance to beat them at their own game. Get loud. Email them, comment on their social medias, call into their offices. Let them know how you feel about their mishandling of the Officer Dages case. They'll listen.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about, I don't know how much personal info you're willing to share, at least just a little bit about, you and Matt, and you guys have children?
Not yet. So we got married 4 months before Matthew's on-duty incident. And then we went on a month-long honeymoon in Latin America. So we truly had 3 months of normal married life. And then this happened and we had to move and, we had death threats. So we want to start a family very badly, but we haven't been able to because literally our lives have been held hostage by this district attorney, Summer Stephan. So no children yet, hopefully soon when we can close this chapter. But I mean, yeah, we're a young, newly married couple. We have been together a few years. We're both from San Diego. Our families are here, and we both come from this long line of military veterans, law enforcement professionals. And so I always joke that it's in our DNA to serve the community. And so I know Matthew personally just absolutely loves being a police officer. It's his passion in life. He sees it as his life's purpose. And on top of that, being able to serve the San Diego community where he was born and raised, he loves San Diego. So this situation is horrific and devastating, but it's especially awful for Matthew because this is he thinks his purpose. This is the city he loves to serve. And because, something happened on the other side of the country on May 25th, Matthew gets demonized for doing his job across, in California on May 27th. So it's pretty heartbreaking across the board.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's tragic to see what's going on. And so you guys have family in the area? You're originally from that area in California?
We are. And so we're so fortunate. Our families are nearby and our support system is here in San Diego, which has just been amazing because we literally were, displaced from our home for a month because BLM wouldn't stop protesting and targeting it with threats. And it was horrible.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. Well, that's wrong in and of itself, but I don't imagine there was any, there were any consequences or that you had any recourse, for them basically harassing you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they instead, they were interviewed by the media and they openly declared that their intention, their mission was to make police officers and their families feel unsafe in their homes. And that was celebrated by the media. That was allowed. There's zero accountability. It's outrageous.
Can you imagine if police officers were, if they did a media interview and said something even remotely similar, to that, about criminals. Like, hey, we're coming for you. No criminal is safe. There's nowhere for you to hide. Oh my God! Like, I can't even imagine the rioting and looting and the media outrage over something like that. Which that's what police officers are supposed to do. They're supposed to go find the criminals.
Yeah.
But if you say that out loud, you're racist. You're bigoted. You're oppressive. You're evil.
It's a double standard. And I feel like, and you know this firsthand, and I as a police wife know this, but the community, I feel like, loses sight of this. Is like, cops are not allowed to be human. They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean anyone is inherently bad or racist. And another thing I feel like really gets left out is officers their work is not normal, right? They're not behind a desk. If they're working patrol, they're out in the streets, which means if they're either going radio call to radio call, or they're just dealing with like back-to-back crisis. And so that plays into like how they perform their job. There's like compassion fatigue, there's stress. I mean, I can't even imagine. You're a police officer, so you can certainly speak to this firsthand. I can't imagine what it's like to be on patrol, to be going back-to-back calls, dealing with people on their worst day, dealing with homicides, dealing with criminals, and being held to this impossibly high standard of perfection. You're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to mess up in any way. You're not allowed to say anything. Like, it's conveniently impossible for like the media and all these groups that are anti-cop to just basically like one hair out of line, and it's like the cop is bad and racist, and it's like this can't be like realistically what we're holding our officers to, the bar that we're holding them to. Like, these are humans, they make mistakes, they're doing their best, and they are working under such high pressure situations, like back-to-back shifts. It's like we have to give them some grace reasonably. I'm not saying, we need to excuse all mistakes, but I'm saying like, let's acknowledge that they're humans, they make mistakes, and the line of work that they're in is a line of work that a majority of Americans could not and are not brave enough to do. And so we need to give some credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very well said. I think that's lost on a lot of people because, you hear the old adage, well, I pay your taxes, or my taxes pay your salary. And I think that people, okay, obviously, yes, you pay taxes. And so, you get this benefit of having police protection, but that doesn't mean you can dictate how a police officer does his job. And it certainly should not dictate that just because you have a problem with the way a police officer does his job, that you call down to the DA or the mayor or the chief and you file a complaint and that officer loses his job, right? Now, under reasonable circumstances, like you said, obviously, officers are held to a higher standard, and they're also held to a very different standard than any other profession. But I think there can be some leeway for minor mistakes because they are human and they are fallible. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to
go ahead.
Cut you off, but you got me really excited because it's like, instead of going that direction that you're alluding to, at least in La Mesa and definitely in San Diego, and I would argue most places across country, are going the opposite direction. Because now, like, for example, all this happens with La Mesa. They completely botch Matthew's case. And now the city of La Mesa is actively recruiting for a police oversight board. So what you have is, and you see this play out in cities across the country, you've got citizens with no knowledge, no training on law enforcement tactics, or the law enforcement profession. You've got them on this like little panel, and now they're going to review the performance of a police officer and determine not only like, oh, is this within policies, is reasonable? They're going to dole out punishment as well. Are you kidding me? That's like if you or I tomorrow joined an oversight commission for surgeons. I have zero knowledge and understanding of what goes into that job. Why the hell would it be appropriate for me to review their performance and then recommend discipline? But that's the normal standard that's kind of like popping up across the country, and literally La Mesa is recruiting for a police oversight board right now. How insanely illogical is this?
Well, and I imagine that those people are going to be paid with tax dollars as well. So you're going to spend taxpayer dollars to fund an oversight committee who has absolutely no idea what the hell they're doing, when you could probably pay, I don't know, 3 or 4 more police officers to join your police force. But that's interesting because it kind of leads us into the investigation. Now, last year, during all the rioting and looting and all these big urban cities in Portland, during the riots, when the Portland riot team was trying to basically get control of their city, there were all these complaints of police brutality, that they attacked peaceful protesters. And from what I understand, the DA in that area didn't prosecute any of those officers because there wasn't anything to prosecute. But instead, so they went outside the normal procedure for adjudicating these cases and hired special prosecutors. So they went hunting for a prosecutor that would basically give them the result that they wanted, the result that they were looking for. And something similar happened with Matthew's case during the investigation. Remember you saying they hired a private investigative firm?
Oh yeah, whatever happened up in Oregon sounds creepily familiar to what happened here in San Diego. So essentially, just to give you an idea of timeline, so my husband's on-duty incident happens on May 27th. I think it was like a Wednesday. So that weekend, there was a protest at the PD. It devolves into arson and buildings burn down, riots, and the next day, the city comes to us and tries to bribe Matthew. And they brought me into the room, I think thinking that like, oh, it's a wife. She'll be like, we can appeal to their emotions, and completely underestimated the fact that like, I'm a fighter like my husband. I knew his use of force was good, and so did he. And so they essentially offered Matthew $600,000 to resign voluntarily. And they said, move up the coast, take the cash, take your wife, move up the coast, have a great life. And we knew, I mean, to resign would look like resigning in lieu of termination. So we declined because we knew that would be the kiss of death for his career. And we leaned into, you want to do a use of force investigation, please do. I know we're within policy. And so the city manager issued a veiled threat and said like, well, even if we can't get you on use of force, like we will find a way to fire you, kind of like threatened us. And we were like, we're not budging. Like we are principled. We are people of integrity. Matthew did nothing wrong. Like, do the investigation, clear him on use of force, and let us move forward with our lives. And so essentially what the city did is they kind of like went outside of their standard operating procedure. So normally if there's ever any community issue with like a use of force or police conduct, they do what's called an IA or internal affairs, and they launch an investigation and look into like, was anything wrong? Did anything wrong happen here? And so they bypassed that, and the city pays an outside firm named Norman Traub and Associates. They pay them almost $100,000 basically to produce a hit piece report on Matthew. So they couldn't get him on use of force. He's cleared. But they started trying to poke holes in his police report and say like really stupid things like, well, we don't agree with the word you used in an observation that's not material to the detention or the arrest. It's like, that is irrelevant. That is backed by so much case law. But the way that, California is structured is like, even the allegation of dishonesty in the police profession is like blacklisted, termination. So all they had to do is pay this firm $75,000 to produce this report that says like, officer could have been dishonest because we don't agree with word choice and how he talked about an observation. And that gave them the leeway that they needed to move forward with terminating Matthew, making a big public spectacle about it so that they could tout to the community like, oh, we got rid of the bad guy. He's the scapegoat. Like, please don't burn down our city anymore. And it's insane that the system is designed to throw good officers under the bus for political gain. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's touched off almost 17 months, 17 months to the day of, my husband losing his reputation, credibility, livelihood, and his freedom has been put on hold. So it's sinister. Like my eyes as a police wife are wide open that, city police departments, I think it's a little different with sheriff's departments, but city police departments, if they are governed by a city council and a city manager and a mayor who are anti-cop, or even, maybe they just need to get rid of a cop for political reasons, it's designed for them to do it very easily.
How's the support been from like other members of the police department and the community? And I don't mean like the Black Lives Matter community, because we all know that they're out of their minds. But I'm listening to you tell this story about, hiring an outside agency to do the investigation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with law enforcement and sort of the intricacies of those types of investigation. Now, I live in Idaho, and it might be a little bit different than in California. But if there's a use of force, like a critical incident, officer-involved shooting or something like that, an outside agency will come in and do the investigation, like an outside law enforcement agency, right? Sworn officers will come in and do that investigation. They don't hire private firms who aren't beholden to an oath of office or anything like that. Like you said, they paid him 75 grand. Here, give us the result we want. So that's not normal, and it's really shady, and it's unethical and immoral, in my opinion, the way they went about this. So what's the response been from like other police officers and other members of your community?
Amazingly supportive. I think anyone with even like a tiny bit of law enforcement knowledge, just basic level of knowledge, read like 2 paragraphs into the report and they start laughing hysterically, because the report, not only is it a hit piece, but it's so poorly done and so poorly written. And that's evident to like all of our supporters, anyone who is like remotely knowledgeable about law enforcement, that's evident right off the bat. So we have just been surrounded by this incredible community of not just police, but police supporters and community members who, are committed to knowing the truth about what happened on May 27th. Not what the clickbait media headlines tell you, not what fake victims are on their Instagrams hollering about, like the truth. Yeah. So that's been really encouraging because, it's important based on what's happening to us. It's so important for people to get loud and for people to really help us fact check this false narrative. And like I said, anyone with any basic knowledge on law enforcement looks at the video. We've even had people watch the video and say, where's the use of force? Because it's just so like benign. Yeah. And it's really hard for a lot of people to understand, like, how did this become an issue? This was a very justified use of force. This officer was composed. This is, and you can probably attest to this type of interaction is so common in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Like officers deal with this all the time. And like we talked about earlier, an officer's job is to have command presence, control the situation. And, it should be a non-starter. It should be not an issue. And yet here we are almost a year and a half later, but the community's been really supportive, which is just amazing.
Well, that's good. That's good. And it's amazing that we've gotten to a point now where we have to teach grown adult men that, you do have to have some respect for authority. I realize that your mom or your dad didn't teach you that while you were growing up, and that's why you're in this situation. But this is how the real world works. It's time for a little lesson in civics, I suppose. Officers are in charge when they show up on scene. That's the simple way that I can describe it to you. If an officer approaches you on a traffic stop or some sort of investigative detention, he's in charge and you have to do what he says. It's simple as that. Get used to it. Okay, that's the way the Supreme Court has ruled on it. That's the law of the land. That's just the way it is. So we've talked a lot about the DA, Summer Stephan, and she's absolutely horrible. She's the worst. But who are some of the other key players as far as like people in positions of authority with this?
Well, it all started with the command staff at La Mesa Police Department. So the chief and the captains, they are spineless, but beyond that, like the patrol officers are all like, they belong to a union, but the captains and the chief are at-will employees. So they serve at the pleasure of the city manager, city council, city mayor. And that matters because essentially what that means is like job security means that the command staff are going to do whatever the city employees tell them to do. Mm-hmm. So definitely that, played out horrifically in our case because the city mayor basically the day after the riots was like, we need to get rid of this officer by any means necessary. And so command staff literally had a roundtable meeting and they said, we can't get Dages for his use of force. What else can we get him on? So that was the police chief, Walt Vasquez, and then the captains, Matt Nicholas and Ray Sweeney. Suspiciously, like right after the then chief Vasquez fired Matthew Dages, he then put in his 2 weeks notice and left. And since then, one of the captains has been promoted to chief. And it's like, these people in positions of power will not hesitate to do this to another police officer when it's politically convenient for them to do. And so, like, regardless of how people feel about the case, it is factual that the city in La Mesa and the people in positions of power will throw an officer under the bus without a moment's hesitation. And so it's like, I hope that other officers, not just in San Diego, but those that are still at La Mesa and their loved ones are paying close attention because officer safety is at the highest risk when those people are in control.
Now, just to give you folks an idea who are watching and listening of how quickly your command staff can turn on you as a police officer. Officer Dages was selected to be a member of the SWAT team, and it was Chief Vasquez, correct, that sent him a congratulations card saying, "Hey man, I'm so proud of you. You're going to make a great addition to the team. Right on. Congratulations, all the things," right? And then here we are, right? We're in this situation because he was spineless, because he was a coward, and then he puts in his 2 weeks and checks out, so he doesn't have to deal with it anymore. That's how quickly this can turn around, because police officers are expendable. It's sad to say, but they are. And I think that's just a further testament to, I guess, the nobility of police officers, because they know this. They know how expendable they are, yet they continue to make sacrifices. They continue to go out and protect a city that's ungrateful to them, right? Despite knowing that things like this, that the things that happen to Officer Dages can very well happen to them. And they do it anyway because they know that it's important.
Absolutely. And it's a vocation. It's a calling to protect and serve. And so I just think the profession, the men and women in blue who serve, I think deserve all of our support and all of our respect. And going back to your earlier point of just to give listeners an idea of how quickly the political winds can shift. And you've got these spineless, inept leaders who are so quick to just bow for the purpose of political survivalhood. Leading up to May 27th, like you said, the police chief himself called Matthew a role model, sent congratulatory card to our home. And additionally, every day the chief would look at the watch command log from the night before, and any type of proactive arrest or anything positive, he would do congratulatory cards for each police officer. So it's not just one card from the police chief before this incident. It is, we started keeping them at one point because they were just so it was just a really neat thing. And I think the year leading up to May 27th, I think Matthew had close to 75 congratulatory notes from the chief, encouraging proactive arrests, really encouraging, Matthew, you're doing a great job. You're such an asset to the team. And it's as soon as those political winds shift, it's oh, well, the word he used to describe an observation that's immaterial to their detention and arrest, I don't know that I agree with it. So therefore, fired, villainized, criminally charged. It's disgusting.
It is. And it makes your stomach churn. So you said that there was a captain who was promoted to chief. What's his name?
Ray Sweeney. His name and email address is rotating at the bottom of the screen right now.
Okay. And so so since Vasquez quit and took off, I imagine that Ray Sweeney, I think you said that he was sort of in league with the rest of the command staff and the DA in doing what they did to Matthew. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's not a coincidence that he was promoted to chief. The city essentially wants to keep someone in the position of chief that they can control. And Sweeney demonstrated to them that he will continue to villainize Matthew. And so, in fact, while they were interviewing for, chief candidates, they actively asked candidates, how do you feel about the Dages case? And what's your position? And will you uphold the city's position on the Dages case? So it's a lot of corruption, a lot of collusion happening, but essentially Ray Sweeney was made chief because the city knew they could control him and they could continue their position against Matthew Dages, demonizing Matthew Dages. It's sickening.
This sounds very familiar with a couple departments that I've worked for. Luckily we, in those departments that I'm aware of, we haven't had anyone go through what Matthew is currently going through, but I can see how it would happen very easily. Like you said, with the way these, you would think a chief of police, right, who's risen to this position of authority would have a backbone and be able to, after all these years of law enforcement experience and trying to be ethical and scrupulous and doing the right thing on a daily basis, could look at this and go, this is absolutely wrong. This is absolutely wrong, and I'm not going to stand behind it. I will stand up for this officer because it's wrong what you're doing to him. And even if it costs me my position as chief, I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. But obviously, these chiefs, Vasquez and Sweeney, have no fucking spine at all, and they're willing to throw an officer under the bus who's trying to start a family, who are very productive, competent citizens and residents of their local community, all for what? Where's Vasquez now? What's he doing now? What did he gain from this?
Yeah, he's a laughing stock. I'll tell you that much. He's not doing much of anything right now. And at the end of the day, what you described, that's a true leader's response. And that didn't happen in this case because there were no true competent leaders at La Mesa. There still are not. And as a result, officer safety is at risk. And like, I think the community's eyes should be wide open that there are people in positions of power mishandling cases, upending the lives of officers and their families. And we have to get loud about it because that's the only way that we can prevent it from happening to another law enforcement family.
Summer Stephan, she needs to resign. She's immoral. She's corrupt. She's a coward. At the very least, she's all of those things. This is not right.
And even this week on her social media, it's so ironic. She announced a new training that her department is rolling out to staff in the tourism industry and in, I think, the hospitality industry to train those people on how to recognize and report crime. And it's like, that's her focus. Like, even if they do report crime, what is her office going to do about it? Because they've already shown us in the Matthew Dages case that when crime reports are staring them in the face, if it's politically convenient for them to not charge a criminal, they're going to do that. So she's a joke. She's a wannabe woke DA. She's up for re-election in 2022, and we've got to get her out of office immediately.
Have you, I don't think we've ever talked about this, and you've probably considered it, I'm sure. Have you considered reaching out to the bar in California and complain about her?
That's a great question. So actually what ended up happening earlier this month, I believe, is 5 separate agencies stepped forward and requested to the Attorney General of the state of California, they requested investigations into Summer Stephan's office for her mishandling of this case. And that's huge because it's like 5 separate agencies are getting loud about this abuse of discretion, this misconduct, and they're requesting that the DA recuse herself and that some other party come in to criminally charge Amari Johnson because obviously Summer Stephan has shown us it's a conflict of interest for her and she's going to like shield a criminal so she can pursue this stupid case against Matthew Dages. So people are getting loud about it. The Attorney General's office is being tapped to intervene because this is an abuse of power in the highest of places.
And DAs take an oath of office as well. I mean, don't make no mistake. It's not just officers who are beholden to their oaths. And Summer Stephan has just completely disregarded and dismissed the things that she swore to uphold and defend. And this is just, like you said, this is the pinnacle of immorality and completely unethical. And she needs to resign. So at the very least, she needs to recuse herself. But I think she needs to resign. This is just a poor display of prosecutorial discretion. I mean, you're protecting a criminal for the sake of your narrative in prosecuting a police officer who, like you said, has an untarnished record. And I mean, from what it sounds like, he's been given several accolades by his department for his performance on duty. So Summer Stephan needs to step down. And if she's not willing to step down, then she needs to be removed. And I think later on, if you have it, I'll get the contact information from the Attorney General, or at the very least, I can look it up. I would contact the State Bar of California and file a complaint. I mean, we need to do whatever we can, like you said, to make noise with this. The other side is making plenty of noise, right? They're yelling and screaming. They're burning down cities. Now, obviously, we're not going to stoop that low as to burn down our own cities, but we have to make some noise with these people. We have to make it difficult for them. We have to put the pressure on them to do the right thing.
We do. And collectively, we need to draw a line in the sand and tell these elected officials that we see what you're doing and it is not acceptable. And we as a law enforcement community will not accept this demonizing of our profession for people just doing their job simultaneously while crime is skyrocketing. Like this is not okay with us. So it's really important to get loud, email, make phone calls, comment on the social media accounts of these elected officials, and let them know we're drawing a line in the sand and we will not put up with their misconduct.
Yeah, so the two names you need to keep in mind while you're writing your emails, sending your letters, making your phone calls, DA Summer Stephan, and then Chief of Police, is it Ryan Sweeney?
Ray Sweeney.
These people need to be held accountable. This is not right. They're the ones that need to be on the chopping block at this point for the corruption, the collusion, and just the shady way that they've gone about this whole thing. It's just disgusting and it's appalling. So scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now is the link for your husband's campaign, the fundraising campaign from the Pipe Hitter Foundation. So you guys are going to be inundated with all kinds of probably legal fees. And I mean, if you're not already, but everybody watching, and then again, I'll post this link in the description section. So anybody watching later or anybody listening, you can look this up and go to the website, make a donation to the Dages family. They need our help right now, and this is what we got to do as American citizens. I mean, yeah, I realize that I don't live in California, and a lot of my followers and viewers don't live in California, but this is what we have to do. Nobody's coming to save us from this kind of stuff, whether it's a vaccine mandate or whether it's a corrupt, woke DA prosecuting an officer for doing his job. We have to stand up together, and the more numbers we have, the more effective we'll be. So go make a donation if you can, even if it's just a couple of bucks. Share the link with your friends. Share the email addresses with your friends, and let's make some noise on this.
Amen. Thank you so much. And yeah, if people want updates on our case, there's an Instagram account that they can follow. Clear Officer Dages on Instagram is a great resource for staying up to date on the case happenings and other ways that you can help. And just thank you guys so much for standing with us. Like, I don't think a lot of police families realize, I know I didn't realize that, yes, you pay into a union and you think that that union is going to cover any legal fees that you'll need. And that's not true, as we're learning. So to date, we've paid over $80,000 out of pocket because the union just doesn't cover all of the legal fees that are required for us to advance our case and get that much closer to victory. So we appreciate all the support. Donations of any amount are such a huge help to our family. They are going to ensure that if we need to go to trial over this, we're not afraid to, but your donations help ensure that our legal team can be battle ready for the courtroom.
Yeah, and that's what we need. So yeah, go visit the Pipe Hitter Foundation. Look up Matthew Dages. Like I said, even if it's just a couple bucks, anything helps. Well, Christina, thank you for being on with me tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope that this helps. And if there's ever anything in the future that I can do to help, be sure to reach out to me. I would love to.
Thank you so much, Nate. I've enjoyed this very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.